Hey, welcome everybody. It is officially 8:30. We want to get this started. Real quick before we start, I always like to let people know that we have a Facebook page, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. You can follow that, follow our group, follow our speakers. You can find events that are going on in the tri-state area to keep you busy at AA, just in case. You with us tonight? We're going to have a little silence here, a little focus. Help us out. Our sister group is a Big Book study, meets every Thursday in Doylestown. It's about a block and a half from here on Thursday, 7:30 p.m. at Salem UCC Church, 186 East Court Street, Doylestown, PA. It's a Big Book study. There's flyers on the back table, not only for this group, that group, and all other groups. If you have any other flyers that you'd like to put out, please feel free to bring them and put them out there. Right now, Dan's going to come over here and we'll get this going. Thanks.
Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Dan, and I'm an alcoholic. Hi. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street at 8:30 p.m. in Doylestown, PA. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. right here. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God, reliance, and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first name? Hey Sam, welcome. Robert, welcome. Ricky, welcome. Eric, welcome. Andy, welcome. Lindsay, welcome. Okay. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands? All right. Are there any announcements for the good of AA? We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD donations, which is right back there. If you would like a CD of any speaker, past or present, see me or Ron before or after the meeting. They are available free of charge. Nick is going to read the AA Preamble.
My name's Nick, I'm an alcoholic. The AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy. Neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And we have Milton to come up and read the 12 steps.
Woo!
Milton, alcoholic. 12 steps. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives became unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
The seventh tradition. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. At this time, I would like to pass the basket. We have no dues or fees, but we have expenses. This group provides many services. Your donations cover rent, big books, CDs, events, and workshops, etc. There's absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. I'd like to introduce the speaker at this time. Tonight we have Rory MC coming from Connect the Dots group in Las Vegas, Nevada. He's a good friend of the Conscious Contact group. Here he is.
This thing's a little close to me here. I'm not that secure in my manhood. I got to push it back just a hair. I'm Rory McShane. I'm alcoholic.
Hey, Rory.
I love the moment before a meeting starts, but well, for y'all, the moment after a meeting starts too, when you just sit there and you hear 100 people talking at once, and it's peaceful, man. 100 people talking and nobody listening. It's beautiful. I love AA. I am home. My name is Rory McShane. I'm alcoholic. My home group is Connect the Dots in Las Vegas. My sobriety date is June the 5th of 2010. I sponsor Other Men in Alcoholics Anonymous. My sponsor is Charlie Parker from Austin, Texas. It is very important to him that I am up here in a coat and tie this evening. It is not as important to me, but to him it is very important. So if you happen to be around Austin and see him, report back that I was in fact in a coat and tie. But the top button is not a fat guy button, so I'm going to let that one go before I proceed. A little struggle here, man. I was a little nervous, when we pulled up this evening. We went out to eat for a bit, and I was a little nervous when I pulled up this evening. And I get asked to speak in Alcoholics Anonymous a little bit, and sometimes I'm nervous, and sometimes I'm not. And I think I get that way because my ego wants me to. The temptation wants me to come up here and be funny for an hour and make people laugh and be impressive and tell some stories and let's go home. And what I resist sharing that deep level of fear and insecurity. There's that line in Bill's story where it says, quicksand spread in all directions. And I've felt like that my entire life. But sharing that is scary, right? So I took a walk and I asked God to help me be honest, to help me be genuine. Because guys, being able to do that for me is what got me sober. I was sitting in a truck with my truck with a guy I sponsor the other day, and we were dropping him off at work. He came over to my house. We have a meeting at my house on Sunday nights. If any of y'all are out in Las Vegas, you're always welcome. And we were dropping him off at work, and he's been sober 8 months, and I just started sponsoring him, and he hasn't done any work yet in our fellowship and in our book, and he doesn't. And he said, "Man, I don't understand it. I've been sober 8 months. I go to meetings, but I feel like everybody hates me, and I'm afraid every morning that I wake up, and every day it's the day they're going to fire me today." And I said, "Brother, you and I suffer from the same thing, man. My brother, you know what's going on." Because that's my problem, right? What's wrong with me started long before I took a drink, and is wrong with me long after I took a drink. Alcohol was a solution to what is wrong with me. I remember being 8 years old, sitting on the steps at my mother's house, and I asked her if I was mentally challenged, right? Because I felt so different from all the other kids at school. Andy's known me a while. I'm surprised he didn't holler out, and she said yes, because I felt so different and apart from everyone else. I felt like they had a meeting before school each morning. And they were like, all right, we're going to be cool. We're going to be friends. We're going to tell jokes. Nobody tell Rory, though. Nobody let him know this is happening. And, by the time I was 11 years old, I started sticking razor blades in my arm because I hated how it felt in my own skin. And I remember, I guess I was about 14 years old, and we're sitting in Alicia Stanley's living room, and let me stop real quick. Who remembers the first time they took a drink? Anybody? Hands? Okay. Does anybody remember the first time they had barbecue brisket? I'm a big boy and I love barbecue brisket, but I do not remember the first time I had it. But I can tell you the time of year, the color on the walls. And, so we're sitting in this girl's living room, and her parents have gone out to wherever, and we sneak in the fridge and we get a couple of beers from the back so they wouldn't notice we'd taken them, and we drink them as fast as we can. And what happened for me in that moment, man, is the voices in my head shut up. The voice that says they're going to fire you tomorrow, she doesn't even like you, then people are talking about you, it shut up. And I could go. And if you've ever taken a drink or an outside issue and gone, you're in the right place. That is the sound of horrific emotional pain being released. I don't know if you knew that. And so unconsciously and unknowingly, what happened was I found a solution for what had been wrong with me. I found a solution for the fact that I could never sit in my own skin. I think one of the most important lines in our literature, right, is we were restless, irritable, and discontent unless we could once again gain the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once from taking a few drinks. That tells me right there, I am restless, irritable, and discontent when I'm sober. My problem is, I got a good buddy of mine, he lives out in New Jersey now, and I called him to see if he wants to have breakfast tomorrow, and to look at the two of us from the outside, man, you would have, God love the guy. The first time I got out of treatment when I was 16 years old, he showed up with a 30 rack of natural light knocking on the window, and I was like, my homie. But to look at the two of us from the outside, we were always getting in trouble, and we were always the problem kids, and we were always getting loaded, and you'd have been like, man, those guys are alcoholics. And the difference between me and him is he'd gotten this good job, and he'd met this good girl, and they had this beautiful baby, and he said, man, I'm not going to do this anymore. I don't want to risk this wonderful life, and he moved to New Jersey, and I don't know who moves to New Jersey to get sober, but he did. And anybody here from New Jersey this evening? I'm surprised y'all raise your hands, man. I've spent some time in New Jersey. I would have kept mine down. And he doesn't touch it. I see him every couple of years, and I was like, how's it going, man? And and he just doesn't drink because he knows that, man, if I drink, I'm going to lose this beautiful, wonderful life that I have. And I'm the guy who swears at 9 o'clock in the morning, I am not going to drink because I know I'm going to get kicked out of mom's house, and I'm going to lose the truck, and I'm going to lose the little job, and I'm going to lose the girl, I'm going to lose all this stuff. But by about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, like 1 is cool, because I need something. I can't function sober. I can't stand sober. And it never feels at the moment like, I have never once gone into my buddy's fridge and been like, man, the spiritual malady is on me bad today, and the mental obsession, But it gets so tight in my own skin, and it's, and I need just one. I need just one to function. And, so I started drinking. I was about 14 years old, and I really didn't need Alcoholics Anonymous till I was about 16 years old. So I did control drinking pretty well, man. I give myself credit. So I was 16 years old. I went through my first treatment center, and they didn't know anything about anything, and I knew everything about everything. So I got me a treatment center girlfriend, and we got out of there. And anybody here tonight with their treatment center girlfriend, much love to you, man. I relate. Some of the gentlemen are laughing a little too hard at that, and a little too much relation. But you know, man, by the time I was 17 years old, I honestly wanted to stop. I honestly wanted to be done. And at the term alcoholic was too big of a word for me. It was too, I wasn't down with that yet. But I knew that something weird had happened, man, because when I started high school, I was in the Boy Scouts, and I was on the football team, and I was in the advanced classes, and my goal, I was going to go to West Point and be an officer in the Army. That was my whole goal in life, and it looked like it could happen, man. I was Captain America. And a couple of years later, man, I'm showing up to remedial math class once a week at best. And all the guys that I go out and get loaded with on Friday night, they're doing weird stuff like showing up at class on Monday. That did not make sense to me. And I'll tell you what happened. I had gotten this girl pregnant, and for those of you who know me in the room, that's not particularly an unusual occurrence in my life. I'd gotten this girl pregnant, and she ended up having a miscarriage. And her parents basically said, if you come around again, we're calling the police. You're not welcome around. And I knew something had gone terribly wrong. And I wanted to stop. I figured, man, if I could stop, I could get my life back on track. I could finish high school. I could maybe go to community college for a couple years, get back on the right track, get into school, and really make something of my life. And I meant it. And I swore with I told my father, I said, you let me back in the house, I promise I'm done, Dad. I am done. And I told the girl I was seeing, and I went to church, and I met with the youth pastor, and I genuinely meant it. You could have hooked up a lie detector test to me, and I would have passed. Dad, I am not going to do this again. I meant it. And 6 weeks later, I come out of a blackout in a motel in Hagerstown, Maryland. Because I'm the real McCoy. I'm the genuine article. I do not have the ability to make that decision. And remembering what it was like and playing the tape through doesn't work for a guy like me. And if it works for you, rock on, baby, but we don't suffer from the same thing. There's a line in the big book that says, if you draw his fallacious logic to its rational end, it sounds like the philosophy of a man who bangs himself in the head with a hammer to stop the headache. But if that headache gets bad enough, if the brainstorm is painful enough, I will hit myself in the head with the hammer. Emotional pain will always supersede rational thought. And so I come to out of this blackout 6 weeks sober, after having been sober for 6 weeks. And at the time I told myself, I was like, I basically completed my goal. Like, I proved I don't have a problem. I stopped for 6 weeks. We're good. Rock on. And, oh man, was, the last 6 months of that I was out there it was the scariest time of my life, because it had stopped working for me. The solution had stopped working for me. Yeah, alcohol is a chemical. It's not magic. The more and more I use of it, the less and less effective it becomes. And I had gone from this guy who, when I was 14, 15 years old and had a few beers, and I was your best bud in the life of the party, and come on in the house and eat some food and crash on the couch. Granted, it probably wasn't my house or my food or my couch that I was inviting you to, but you were welcome. And I had gone to a guy who was just as homicidal and suicidal when I was completely loaded as when I was bone powder dry sober, man. It was bad, man. And I remember, and in the process, man, I had gone from this kid who was a Boy Scout and a nice kid to a scourge on the community and a scourge on my parents. And my father put me in a headlock and threw me out of his house, and he said, I got other kids here. You are not welcome. And, it took me several years into sobriety to realize that I'd been homeless. Like, I would not cop to that. And what had happened was I was sharing one time, and a guy said, yeah, man, I was homeless when I was a teenager too. I said, I was never homeless. And he goes, did you have an address? And I'm like, well, what's that got to do with it? Come on. And I remember one of my last attempts at not believing that I was the problem, right? That, I decided that society was the problem. I'm very intelligent and enlightened, and you all don't understand a complicated soul like myself, and I was going to move to the National Forest in Western Maryland. That was my plan. And I had this little Ford Ranger, and I packed it up, and I picked up the girl, and we got some liquor and beer and other issues, and we headed out to the National Forest to start our new life on the frontier. And I'm taking notes of who's laughing, just okay, y'all, you're gonna see me have a meeting. So anyways, we make this little fire, and I get loaded, and we run out of firewood. So I'm gonna, I'm a man's man. I'm gonna go get some more firewood. And I put on my boots, and I got my boots and my boxer shorts and a hatchet, and I'm like, stumbling out in the woods to get some firewood. And we eventually pass out, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, I wake up screaming bloody murder, and I'd hit myself with the hatchet, but I didn't know for like several hours into it. And so we pack up the truck and we leave, and after 18 hours in the forest, and I am not Davy Crockett is the end of that story. At a certain point, man, I think for all of us, we get to this place where today looks a lot like yesterday, and yesterday looks a lot like last week, and last week looks a lot like last month. And I never mean it to, but that's always where it ends, man. And where it ended for me, I was back at my mother's house, and we'd stayed at this girl's mother's house for a little bit, but her parents had a little bit of self-respect, so they said, he's got to go, or y'all got to go. So any real alcoholic knows what happened. We both went, and we're back at my mother's house, because self-supporting at this point in my life is not happening. And so we're back there, and we get loaded, and a buddy of mine, actually we had breakfast with him today. He was really my only friend in the world at that point. He drags me, he was a big guy at the time. He was, 6'3", 6'4", probably 300 pounds, and he drags me into the basement, and he throws me on the bed in the basement, and he says, "Stay there," and he runs back up the stairs, and I pass out into a blackout. And then I come to the next morning, and he's sitting at my mother's table, and my mother's at the table, and I found out that I'd beaten the living hell out of this girl that I would have told you I was in love with. And my mother looks at me, and this is a woman, my mother is 5 foot and 100 pounds even, and has yet to make her first mistake in life. And she's not opposed to the idea of apologizing. It just hasn't occurred to her. It just hasn't been a problem for her yet. She's a wonderful woman. On more than one occasion, lawyers, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, anybody with a couple letters behind their name that told her that they could fix her kid, she'd hand her credit card to. And she looked at me and she said, "You got 3 hours to get out of my house, or I'm calling the police." And none of us are Satan, man. None of us have ever wanted to make our mothers feel that way. None of us have ever none of us ever wanted that to happen. And so I'm sitting on the back porch of her house. I grew up outside of Baltimore, and about half hour outside of Baltimore, and I'm chain smoking cigarettes, and I'm calling this guy. He was like an addictions counselor sort of guy that whenever I'd get in trouble, my parents would make me go see him. And so I'm calling him, and he finally calls me back, and he says, "Look, I'm not working today, but why don't you come meet me anyways?" And so I go meet with him down in Pasadena. And he says, "Look, man, the first thing he said to me was, he said, 'What are you going to do?' He said, 'You got no money, you got no truck, you got nowhere to go, man, nobody wants you around tonight.' And I said, 'I'll do whatever you tell me to do.' And that was the first time for me that my spirit had superseded my ego. And what I mean by that is that little voice that says, pick up that phone, make that phone call. That little voice that says, get honest with your sponsor. That, the guiding force that we talk about here. That was the first time that had superseded the much louder voice that says, there's no hope for you. And I said, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. And he said, there's a AA meeting tomorrow morning in Brooklyn, Maryland, which is South Baltimore. If you ever find yourself there, I suggest you leave. They'd get that joke in Philly, and maybe not in Doylestown, but And I remember the meeting like it was yesterday, man. I remember this young black guy in the meeting. He had on a red checkered shirt. I could see it in my head like it was yesterday. And he said, today can be the worst day of your life. It can all be uphill from here. And I remember looking up in the wall and reading this second step where they told me that they had the power to restore me to sanity, right? And I didn't believe it. I wasn't like, this wasn't true of me, and I don't think it's ever been true of anyone. Like, I don't know of anyone who's ever come to an AA meeting and looked at the steps and been like, all right, inventory, amends, help people. Cool, that ought to do it. I'm on board, It certainly didn't happen for me. And but I look at this step where it tells me that these people have something that has the ability to restore me to sanity. And man, I'd been saved by Jesus and gone to church and every, psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist, counselor there was, and these people said they had something different, and that was just enough for me. That was just enough hope for me. And so I got that, I got the newcomer token, 24-hour token. I don't know what y'all call it out here, but, about a week later, I got my first sponsor. I was standing outside of the Saturday night young people's meeting in Annapolis, Maryland, and this guy was at the podium talking, and he had on a tie and he looked real nice, and I hated everything he had to say, just every word that come out of his mouth, like it was Kel, and then he called on his friend to share. It was like a 30-minute share, and then and he called on people in Monterey style. And he called on his friend to share, and his friend, and I don't remember what his friend said, but his friend looked happy and sober at the same time, and I'd never been able to get those two things in unison together. And so I go up to him after the meeting, I'm like, man, I'm looking for like a sponsor, man. I felt like I was asking if I could be his girlfriend. It was arguably the most embarrassing moment of my sobriety. I debated leaving recovery at that point. And he looks right back at me and he says, meet me tomorrow night at Rip's Restaurant off Route 3 at, 6 o'clock or whatever, and here's my phone number, call me. So I meet him there, and the guy who had started the meeting had come back to town, the guy who had started their home group had come back to town from England, and they were having a dinner to welcome him back. And I'd never met these guys before, and they were nice to me, and I wasn't the type of guy that you were nice to. I'm not, I deserved it. You shouldn't have been nice to me. Because if I was nice to you, I was trying to steal something from you. And those guys, man, they grabbed me and they loved me, and they dragged me with them to the beach, and they dragged me to, up to northern Baltimore County and northern Virginia and Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and all over the place. And we went to meetings, and we went to the Helping Up mission, and they bought me cheeseburgers till when I didn't have a job, and I was telling that story in Oregon one time, and somebody hollered out from the back, they could have bought you a salad once or twice. I was like, I got feelings too, man. Oh my God. Like kindness, love and tolerance is our code. Come on. And they said, we're going to work the steps really, really quickly because you're really, really going to die. And I'm so grateful that I fell in with those guys, because I fell into some guys who said, we're going to wait a year before you work the steps, or we're going to do a step a month. I judge no man, but I'd have been dead. I would have been dead. And because I needed relief. I was in so much pain. I didn't think I was going to make it through that summer. And I remember I was about 6 weeks sober, and I'd written my first 4-step. And I'm 6 weeks sober, and I'm living with a girl who's 6 days sober. I'm not good at following directions. That's a lie. We were both living at my mother's house. And I call him like, baby, I got to do this 5th step thing. I'll be back in an hour. And like 5 hours later, we're sitting in this guy's garage, and we're going through this. And see, the thing is, I'm a cheater, right? Like my entire life. And so I was told to read how it works and to write this inventory. But I flipped to the page where it has the little chart, Mr. Brown, and I'm like, I don't need to read this. I got it, right? So, of course, there's no 4 column in my first inventory, right? And I'm so excited, man. I've got a list of everyone who's ever wronged me, and this is going to be a goodwill hunting moment. He's going to say it's not your fault, and then he's going to hug me, and this is going to be great. I was really stoked. And I remember the first one, it's the parents, and child abuse, and he goes, what was it like for her to call them lawyers at 2 o'clock in the morning and see if they could help her son? Oh, clearly you didn't hear me. And the child, they hit me, What was it like for her to visit her son in treatment centers? So about like 6 or 7 down the list, I'm getting the gist, right? And that wasn't a joke. That wasn't a joke. That was serious. So I'm getting the gist of this, and literally about 4 hours later, man, what happened for me was that I realized that all of this hatred, man, that I had was aimed here. It was aimed at one place, and that I went into that room and I would have told you that I wasn't afraid of anybody or anything, and I was the only white guy you'd see in West Baltimore at 2 o'clock in the morning. Bear in mind that wasn't true. I just would have told you that. I'm a coward. And what I realized at the end of this thing was that everything I had become in my own mind, this gangster that I'd made myself out to be, was because I was that same 8-year-old kid sitting on the steps at my mother's house, terrified of everything and everyone. What is wrong with me is self-centered fear. And everything I had become and everybody I had hurt, because I am driven. It says in the book, we are driven. What driven means is acting in actions beyond my control. If we get in the truck and I'm being driven by Andy, I have no control over where we're going. When I am driven by self-centered fear, I have no control over where we're going. For the guys in here, when you're refreshing her Facebook page for the 911th time, to see if she's changed her relationship status, I am driven by self-centered fear. And I remember leaving this guy's house, man, and it was a weird feeling, because I had for the first time some level of honesty on what I was, man, and it sat across from me a guy who just said, yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. Without judgment and without, it's powerful. And I walked out of that guy's house, and it was thunderstorming. It hadn't started raining yet, and at the time I'm driving this old Chevy Silverado, and about 300,000 miles on it, and I don't know if it happened in that moment or if I just felt it in that moment, but I did not have the desire to pick up. And that was the first time I could have honestly said that in a lot of years. I had the closest thing to a barn-burning spiritual experience I've ever had in my entire life. I felt touched by the hand of God. See, the fallacy in our program is that I create this relationship with God, and then based on that relationship with God, I do the rest of the work. I do the work trusting that the relationship with God will come, trusting that the belief in God will come. Bill Wilson was sitting in his bed at Towns Hospital writing amends letters, working the steps of the Oxford group when he had his barn-burning spiritual experience. Spiritual experience are results of spiritual action. And for the first time in my life, I'd taken action that wasn't motivated by me. I'm so grateful to those guys, man, those Bowie Friday night guys, and they made me the butt man at the home group. And I was a really big fan of that commitment until I found out it meant picking up cigarette butts after the meeting. I did not get that when they assigned it to me. And they told me that I was going to start paying back the money that I'd stolen. And I remember that the first amends I made was this hardware store, Clement Hardware. And I go there and I got some money in my pocket. I heard a guy say one time, I love it. He said, how do I know when I'm willing to make an amends? You will find yourself in their driveway with their money in your pocket, And I'm sitting there and I call my first sponsor. I'm like, what am I going to do, man? Like, what if they call the police on me? And he goes, do you want to drink vodka? Right? There's a line in our book that says, above everything, we must be rid of this selfishness. And Mark Houston used to say, what does above everything mean to you? Above everything means that above my fear of getting arrested and above my fear of what these people are going to think of me, that I'm going to walk in here and give these guys this money. And I walk in and I ask for the owner, and he's like, who are you? And I'm like, I work for you from this day to this day, and I stole this thing and this thing and this thing, and here's your money. And he looks at the money and he looks at me and he's like, do you want like a receipt or change? And I leave in there, man, I felt so good because I was finally, we sell our dignity. I don't go from the way I am at 14 years old, a kid on the football team loving life, to the way I was a few years later, a taker of everybody and everybody, of everybody that I knew in one fell swoop. It happens in little ticks, tick, 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 tick. I sell off my dignity in little ticks, tick, 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 tick. And slowly I lower my standards and I lower my value system to meet with the level of behavior that I need to do to feel okay internally. And the process of the amends is buying back that dignity and buying back that self-respect and buying back that feelness of being a person and being a man, one little tick at a time. Tick, 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 tick. I was so grateful for those guys, man, because they made me do those things and they weren't coming at it with like, well, you don't have to make an amends if it harms somebody else and you're somebody else, so don't make the amends. They came straight out of the first 164 and they saved my life. I began to find some pretty significant career success, and I started moving around the country for new jobs, and I drifted. I don't know if I drifted away from Alcoholics Anonymous, but I drifted away from our basic text. I drifted away from the first 164 pages of the big book, and I found myself at probably about 6 years sober, living in Las Vegas. I just moved to Texas from Las Vegas at the time, and I was a dedicated AA guy, man. I sponsored, a whole ton of people, and I had a whole ton of commitments, and I was the GSR and the CPC and the PI and the YMCA and the LMNOP, man. And I'm going to meetings 6 or 7 days a week, and my life is looking a lot like this. I was making decent money, and I'm living paycheck to paycheck, strung out on credit card debt. And when I'm dating a girl and somebody asks me how long we've been together, it's like, well, like 7 months, but with 32 breakups in between, and I can't figure out what's wrong with me because I'm doing a ton of AA and I'm sponsoring a ton of guys. I'm at Salvation Army once a week and my life won't move forward, right? And I moved down to Texas and I got a call. I'd been living there about 3 weeks and I got a call from my ex from Las Vegas that she was pregnant with my child. And I was terrified, man. For me personally, kids were never part of my plan, and I was terrified. And I'm living in a different state, and I'm so afraid. And at that time, I meet this guy, Charlie Parker, and a friend of mine, now my girlfriend, had told me to give him a call. She'd heard him speak a few years ago. She said, he's in Austin, you'll get along with him, and you'll really like him. And I remember I go to sit down with him after Primary Purpose Group one night, and he says, he takes me to page 63 of the big book, right? And the big book takes a really hard right turn on page 63, or really 60 to 63, because at that point it stops having much to do with alcohol and it becomes about my level of selfishness and self-centeredness. And I'm going to upset some people with this. I'm excited. You can always tell the guys who are working the program or women too, like the problem is alcohol. And you hear them in meetings, man. They're the guys who say, oh, I screamed at my wife when I left the house and I smacked 2 of the kids and, I was an hour late for work and I watched 2 hours of porn in my cubicle and, I ate a gallon of vanilla ice cream in the truck on the way home, but I'm a winner today because I didn't drink, That makes you something. I don't know if it makes you a winner. But that was my life, man. That was my life, and I couldn't figure out how to stop it. And so I sit down with this guy and he takes me to this part in the book where it says selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of my problem. And then I tell him about how great of my motives are. And then he takes me to the part in the book where it says anybody else ever have the experience where you swear they added something to the big book while you were asleep last night? Like they got in there with their pen and they wrote it. I swore that he had a different big book than I had. Because he takes me to this part. Because for years in the fellowship I've been hearing people talk about motives. I checked my motives. I talked to her about my motives. I was honest, And, but it tells me that even when my motives are good, I am in constant collision with somebody or something. And that was my life. I was in collision in every relationship, in every employment situation, in every friendship. And I didn't know why. And the thing is, man, that none of us are Satan, right? None of us have ever, I have never, and I don't believe anyone in this room has ever gotten into a relationship and said, by the time this is over, she's going to hate me. And none of us have ever gotten a job and the day after the job interview thought, oh, I'm going to make them regret hiring me, man. But I'm jumping job to job and relationship to relationship, and I have no idea why. And we look at this. And we look at this deal where in the third step it tells me, the third step truly in its essence is the admission that my problems are coming from me. They're not happening to me. That anyone subjected to my level of selfishness and self-centeredness is going to want me out of their house and out of their business after a while. And I never see it that way. I see it as if I could just get this right. It says, is he a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness from life if only he manages? Well, what victim means is tricked or duped. Am I tricked or duped into believing that I could wrest satisfaction and happiness from life if only she'll act right, and if only they'll give me a little pay raise, and if only I get a new truck? Am I tricked or duped into believing that? In my entire life, I was tricked or duped into believing that. And then what it says, in making the arrangements, our actor is sometimes quite virtuous. He is sometimes kind, considerate, patient, modest, and even self-sacrificing. And then it says, but sometimes he's mean, egotistical, and selfish, and dishonest. And that's me, man. I'm the guy. I'll come at you. Andy, right? I'll come because I know how Andy is. I'll come at him and be like, man, Andy, you're so much smarter than everybody here. You're the only guy who can understand what I'm trying to do here, man. I really need you on my side. I really need you on board with my plan. And then I'll come at somebody else and I'll be screaming and I'll be hollering because what am I trying to do? I'm trying to get you in line with my will, and I'll use whatever tact that I have to take. And what usually happens? The show doesn't come off. And I'm knocked to the mat again, and on the next occasion I'm going to be more gracious or more demanding as the case may be. I'm going to come at Andy a little bit nicer, or I'm going to scream just a little bit louder in trying to get what I want. Because I believe that if I get what I want, then I'll finally be happy. Then I'll finally stop being restless, irritable, and discontent while I'm sober. Then the bedevilments on page 52, the misery, the depression will finally go away. And it doesn't work again, and I become angry, indignant, and self-pitying, man. I go from screaming at you to how dare you after all I've done for you to it'll never work anyways in 3 seconds. There's the tools of the ego. The ego wants me to keep the problem from being me. So the ego's cool with me screaming, and it's cool with me crying in the corner about how life's unfair to me as long as the problem is not me. And then it takes me into this contract with God, man. It says that if I'm ready. Well, first it tells me that my new job is going to be God is going to be the principals and we are his agents. Everyone uses the boss and the employer, but I like the principals and the agents, right? I worked at this firm called Ryan Irwin and Associates. He was the principal, I was the agent. Nobody was hiring the firm for Rory McShane. I was the and associates part of the sign. I often had to remind myself of that. They're coming to him, and he's going to make the plan, and he might decide to delegate some of the work to Rory McShane and pay him a salary to do it. But he's going to make the plan, and I'm going to execute it. And then I come into this contract with God where it says if I keep close to him and perform his work well, he will provide what I need. And there's no second and in that sentence. It doesn't say if I keep close to him and perform his work well and get a really pretty girlfriend and buy a real nice new truck. If I keep close to him and perform his work well, he'll provide what I need, period. And when the guys who sponsor me call me, that's where we go to every time. I have a guy, he lives in Utah. He's one of my best friends, and I've sponsored him for a little while now. And he calls me, and he's so angry. He says, man, I'm so mad, man. I am everything on page 52. I'm miserable. I'm depressed. I'm finances, personal relationships. I just hate this job. And I go, man, the page 52 is the symptoms of untreated alcoholism, not the symptoms of working at Dave & Buster's, brother. Because me, I'm driven by self-delusion, right? So I want to look at every problem in my life like it's the problem with the job, and it's the problem with the wife, and it's the problem with the relationship or my son or whatever. The problem is that I'm not holding up my end of that third step contract, that I'm not keeping close to God and performing his work well. So I met this guy who, it's funny because I was sitting in a hotel room with my sponsor and his wife in Austin, Texas, and his wife says to me, and if any of y'all know Katie Parker, have ever heard her tapes, I'd suggest you go out and listen to some of them. She's great. And she says to me, Rory, how much time in your day do you give to AA? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm Mr. AA. I'm CPC, GSR, intergroup, LMNOP, man. And she says that's not what I asked. She said, where's your 8-step list? And I said, oh crap, I don't know. And she said, when's the last time you set a timer on your phone and meditated? She said, how many questions are there in the 11th step? I said 12 because 12 is normally the right answer here. It is not 12, just so everyone knows. There are 10 questions on this step. And so we go through these things one by one, and she says, well, it's really surprising that this 4-step program you're working is not working out super well for you. And they say to me, are you willing? Are you a cannot or are you a will not? Are you doing this program as it's outlined in the book? No, I'm not. Are you capable of it? Yes. So that makes me a cannot, that makes me a will not a cannot. Are you willing to do this program as it's outlined in this book? I will. And my life's incredible, man. My life is absolutely incredible. You know, if you looked at the past year of my life and thought, what kind of life is this guy going to have? You know, I found out I was having a son that I didn't plan for, and I had to quit a job that I loved, and I had to move back to a state that I thought I'd left. And you'd be like, man, this guy's had a rough year, but my year has been amazing. You know, I left this job, and I left it on such wonderful terms that I started my own business, and they referred some clients to me. When clients come to them and they're too small, they say, but hire Rory, he used to work for us and he's really good. And I'm in the best relationship of my life, and I bought a house. Coming from a guy who was in constant credit card debt and one credit card to pay off another, I bought a house, and then I bought another house, and I started a business, and my life's been amazing, and it's a product of that 3rd-step contract. It's a product of believing that I am the problem and God is the solution. And it's all well and good to sit up here and say those things, but the problem is at some point tonight, I'm going to be in the car with my beautiful girlfriend, and she's going to say something and be like, again. And that's why a 10 and 11 is so important in my life, because I have to have those relationships in my life that bring me back to, where did I set the ball in motion? Where was I rude, inconsiderate, hurtful? How did I do this? Because I'll tell you what, man, if I have a sponsor and I call him and I said, oh man, my employees are so difficult, or my girlfriend's so difficult, and he says, well, this is how you deal with difficult employees, or, oh, Rory, I'm so sorry to hear you're going through that. That guy's doing me no good. A sponsor's job is an entirely different, we are in the entirely different angle, to help me see it from an entirely different angle. A sponsor's job is to bring me to, where did I set the ball in motion? To bring me to, where do I owe an amends? And as a result of that, a guy who couldn't keep a job for 2 months has had clients, for 2 years, and couldn't be in a relationship for a week has a relationship and a home, and my child, and I have my child full time. And had you told me that 2 years ago, Rory, the thing that's going to set your life on fire is Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have told you, man, I've been in AA for 6 years, and I know what AA has to give, and that's not it. I need counseling, I need therapy, I need, I'm anxious and, whatever. And the thing that has set my life on fire, man, is Alcoholics Anonymous. And the willingness to keep doing it, and the willingness to keep working it. I've had a little bit of material success in the past year, and that's been nice, but I've also been very broke at times, and used to drive for Uber and all kind of stuff, and none of that really matters. What matters is in the 5th step, it tells me that I will be able to be alone at perfect peace. And for a kid who started sticking razor blades in their arm at 11 years old, I'm going to go to bed tonight in my hotel room, and I'm probably going to feel okay in my own skin. And for a guy like me, that ain't nothing. I'm not the guy getting in the fight at the grocery store, you know, because the guy in the 10-item line has 11 items, and I know because I've counted every one 7 times. Most days I'm not. I'm still that guy some days. My experience is that this program is laid out perfectly, but I'm so driven by delusion and fear that to me the answer isn't the program. It never is, right? If I'm going through something, the answer is never more AA, it's never more amends, it's not enough money or a new relationship. So I work in active 10 and 11 to bring me back to the problem is alcoholism. And my alcoholism will get treated one way or another, and I can treat it with these steps, and I can treat it with service, or I can treat it with vodka and a gun in my mouth. The guy that I was talking about, who was the speaker at my first meeting, he ended up becoming a very good friend of mine. He really saved my life. He used to drive me to meetings and buy me food when I was new. And he shot himself after having 6 years. And for those of us who've been around here a while know that that's one of hundreds and thousands, and we could name 20 names like that. Because at the end of the day, this sickness that I suffer from has very little to do with a substance in a bottle. The sickness that I suffer from is that from the minute I put it down, that voice in my head starts going, they're going to fire you tomorrow, she's going to leave you, they're talking about you. You abscess on the face of the earth. And the only thing that I've ever found that's more powerful than that deep, than that feeling that makes me go drink is this God, man. And I want to say this. I'm getting to the end here, but I want to say this real quick, man. The most frequent words I say to my sponsor are "yes, sir." And I think that's really important, man. You know, this guy showed me a level of Alcoholics Anonymous that I'd never experienced before, but hadn't I had the willingness, and hadn't I run up against it and failed a couple times, I wouldn't have been there. And we were down in Florida a couple weeks ago for a talk he was doing, and he was talking about how he was talking about his old sponsor, Mark Houston, and how Mark had set his life on fire when he was in some real trouble. And I'm not a crier by nature. I'm not a big emotional guy. And I started getting tears in my eyes because I realized what everything this man has done for me, and everything that him showing me the first 164 pages in a real way had done for me. And they showed me that God's love is powerful enough even for a guy like me. That God's love is absolute, and that God's love can transform any life. I heard a guy say one time, and I end every talk I give with this. He said that God's love is like the sun. If I walk outside on a sunny day, the sun doesn't say, "No sunshine for you, Rory. I know what you've been doing." The sun shines on me because that's the function of the sun. God loves me because that's the function of God. Nothing I have ever done or ever can do or will do is powerful enough to change the fact that God loves me. But if I hide in the basement and I don't get any sunshine, that's not the sun's fault. Thank you so much for showing me the way out of the basement. God loves you, we love you, and I love you. Thanks.
Let's thank Rory one more time. Our speakers come here at their own time and expense. He flew out all the way here from Vegas. Please take time to form a line and thank him. It's important to our speakers that they know that they're appreciated. They come here for each and every one of us, okay? We're going to head over to Perkins afterwards, about 10:15. It's open to join us. Don't forget that's our meeting. After the meeting, we need a little help setting up. We got to leave 7 deep, 5 across on each side. The rest go on to the rack. We have our new hot dog girls, Kim and Ann. Let's thank them. and Brett, who handles the ham sliders in here tonight, but we'll give him a thank you anyway. We got a nice way of closing. If you can join us, we'll circle up and end it with the Lord's Prayer.